Hello everybody and welcome back. It is good to talk to all of you again today, and today we are looking at HMS Hood once again. Well, why are we looking at this ship? Well, we're looking at the ship because I tried her in a full-on AA build. Wait a minute, why are you doing this? Well, because last time I said something about her AA being quite terrible, and while that is true, her AA is actually quite dismal. When you actually fully spec her for AA, her AA takes a surprising jump in terms of power. And I think I'm really going to have to use that word, surprising. Her AA power goes from pretty much non-existent if you don't fully spec for AA to quite respectable. Now, over the course of this battle, the enemy team there has Lexington. And I want you to keep an eye on the amount of planes I shoot down, essentially with a tier 7 battleship's AA. Of course, do keep in mind that that particular AA is buffed by defensive fire, right? And so, yeah, when she turns on defensive fire, her AA does surprisingly well. The other thing, of course, today that I sort of want to discuss, and this is more of a, let's call this an academic discussion, is whether or not HMS Hood in World of Warships right now would actually be better suited if we move her up to tier 8 with appropriate buffs. So, as of the moment, my overall take on HMS Hood is not a positive one. I think the ship is terrible, and I still think she's terrible. Yeah, her AA is nice, now that I finally messed around with that a little bit. Like, yeah, AA is nice, but again, how many times do you really run into carriers? It's one of those things. And when you're not running into carriers, you really are going to need your guns to go around and actually put the hurt on things. And the Hood's guns are, like I mentioned last time, abysmal. The turret traverse is really, really slow. The guns themselves are like utterly abysmal when it comes to penetration numbers. And it really does struggle against higher tier ships. Like, you take, I don't know, you take a Nagato to tier 8 battle. It's not that big of a deal. You take, hell, you can take Colorado to tier 8 battle, and it's not that big of a deal. You know, her guns can at least output damage. You take a Ganai, and Ganai's superior armor and secondaries and all that stuff, you know, allows her to perform at tier 8. Hood, you take her up to tier 8, and yeah, she does really start to struggle a little bit against the other ships that she has to face. Shots that you expect to be able to pen and do damage with other ships, with Hood, yeah, the shell just would shatter and things like that. It's just, her guns need help. But, I mean, let's talk about some of the proposals, right? Because people have sort of made proposals about what to do with her. Some people just say buff her, make her good at tier 7. Yeah, I can agree to that. I mean, that could be one solution. Just buff the guns, make it so that her penetration values and stuff like that start to get relatively close to some of the other tier 7s, perhaps. Maybe up the, I don't know, up the Sigma a little bit. Could be, you know, make her more like war spike guns. That could be a thing. Turret traverse, yeah, you know, you can make changes to that. Although if you make it maybe, you know, similar to war spikes in terms of Sigma and all that stuff, then maybe turret traverse can be kept the same. You know, like I did mention, the turret traverse is a little bit faster than war spikes, right? So that could be a solution. Could be a solution. One of the other things I've heard is maybe down tier her to tier 6. Don't really think that down tiering to tier 6 is really that good of an idea. The Hood's HP pool at tier 6 is a little bit maybe too big. Her AA, again, if you fully spec for AA, is pretty deadly. And if you run to low tier carriers, I don't think they're ever going to really stand much of a chance there. Her guns at tier 6 are actually okay. I mean, you can overmatch bows of tier 6 battleships. You can do some pretty respectable damage. I mean, her guns against low tier stuff is okay, or lower tier stuff is okay, but it's against higher tier stuff where the struggle really is real. Later on, you'll see me tag an Iowa that was giving me a little bit of a side shot there. The angle wasn't extreme, and I shattered a shell on the main belt. It was just like, ugh, that's depressing. So yeah, I don't think down tiering really is that good of an idea. So maybe, like I said earlier, buffing at the same tier could be a solution. Although, by testing it more and more, and especially having now tested it in an AA spec build, which, you know, like I said, is actually quite decent at dealing with at least tier 8 planes, you know, me and Little White Mouse, because this is how the conversation sort of started, we started thinking maybe it would be better actually just up tier her. Like, give Hood maybe her 1942 refit, that proposed refit that she was going to go under. And then basically do things like, slightly up her armor a little bit, make her bow 32 millimeters, make her stern 32 millimeters. Her center section deck armor is actually already pretty good. So maybe if you do 32 and 32, it'll make her like a British version of Bismarck without the secondary power, but with the AA power, maybe? That could be a thing. Make the guns maybe a little bit more comfortable, so like improve the turret traverse a little bit. Some WD-40 there might help. Make the turret traverse a little bit better. Maybe then, instead of having like sort of warspite levels of muzzle velocity and things like that, maybe just up the muzzle velocity a little bit more to what the 15-inch guns would have had, let's say, with brand new barrels instead of with the current muzzle velocity she has, which is a little bit on the low end. So maybe like up the muzzle velocity, maybe up the crop values of the shells and go from there. I mean, that could make her, and of course, with that refit, like, slightly improve some of the armor as well, maybe slightly improve her torpedo protection, maybe up the amount of AA guns that she has, maybe like really make her a bit of an AA platform. Something a little bit different from, let's say, a North Carolina, which, the North Carolina, for example, has that raw AA power. Well, make it so that Hood maybe doesn't have as much raw AA power, but has that better, like, I guess, alpha AA power, just to quickly knock planes out with a defensive fire consumable. Could be a thing. And I think it does make some reasonable sense, right? Also, by this stage of the battle, as you can tell with the A going off and stuff like that, I mean, I've plunked down 20 aircraft from a Lexington, which is quite good, mind you. Although, again, with any kind of defensive fire, there's always going to be a certain amount of weakness when it comes to, a CV that's able to bait it out and then not come and bomb you right away, maybe wait for that 40 seconds. That could also be a problem, right? Something that the North Carolina maybe won't face as much. So why tier 8 and what does that provide? So my feeling is if she becomes a tier 8, and by the way, this is what I'm talking about here, this Iowa doesn't really have as big of an angle to me. I remember checking on an angle mod. The angle was not very significant, but there you go. I got 3 overpens onto the superstructure, and the one shell that hit the belt shattered. Iowa doesn't exactly have legendarily thick belts, and it's like, that was disappointing. That was definitely disappointing. I hit that and I was just like, what? Are you serious? Yeah. But yeah, so maybe the proposed sort of role at tier 8, what could she be? Maybe she could be that large sort of A platform, because to my knowledge right now, we still don't have at tier 8 any battleship that really fits this role all that well. Sure, the North Carolina has very, very good AA, same with the Alabama, but neither of those two ships really fully keep up with some of the fast battleships in the fleet. So if you think about something like Amagi, Bismarck, for example, they all have their things, but AA power really isn't one of them, although Bismarck AA with manual AA is actually okay. But something like Amagi, great firepower, not the world's best AA. Now, with any other battleship right now, can't really keep up with them, and so the only thing you really have to resort to is like a cruiser, and of course cruisers become prime targets, especially when battleships are angled. Well, with Hood, it can maybe provide that role of like a cruiser, except a nice armored, huge HP pool battle cruiser with like battleship guns in a way, and she can keep up with that, I guess, force of other tier 8 fast battleships, supporting them with your AA, and of course also providing a nice big hit pool, for that little group. So why move her to tier 8 and not keep her at tier 7? Well, at tier 8, it's reasonable to improve the bow and stern armor, right, to 32 millimeters, giving Hood some pretty decent tanking potential against higher tier things, because right now, in her current form, she really doesn't up tier all that well. And by the way, by this point in time, if you look at the battle, haven't done much in terms of damage, right? The guns are just kind of whatever. But at least I've plucked down 27 planes. So that's pretty respectable amount for a battleship at tier 7 against Lexington aircraft, so it's not that bad. So maybe that's the solution. Maybe that's the solution for Hood is, boost her up to tier 8, give her that armor buff, improve her guns a little bit, touch a small improvement to her AA maybe, like giving her what was historically the refit, keep her in the same way that she has with her defensive fire, and maybe she'll work. I mean, hell, at the very least, if Hood was a tier 8 in her, fully done 1942 refit, at least you can have Hood versus Bismarck battles and, settle that age-old question of who's the superior battleship of all time. Again, assuming that Hood had actually been refit correctly. Who knows? You could be like, hey, she's the better ship. I don't know. It's just, I guess, something to think about. Because, yeah, honestly, even after playing her more, I still find Hood to be very, very underwhelming in her present state. So I do hope that some changes come around, although I am for more radical changes as well. Anyways, folks, let me know what you think. Do you think that they should just buff her a tier 7 and keep her as a tier 7 battleship, or do you think the tier 8 idea doesn't sound too bad? Let me know in the comment section below. So from all that, have yourselves a very good Tuesday. Take care, and I'll talk to all of you again really, really soon.